You're listening to episode 106 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Jennifer Sweeney about how she pivoted her business during the pandemic and was able to use the pivot to follow her dreams. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, and we have a conversation today about business. And it's a little bit about business, but also a little bit about taking fearless action in the face of unknowns. And specifically, in this particular episode, we're going to be talking with my guest today about how she pivoted her business when the pandemic first hit and how this pivot has affected her experience of running a business and her ability to pursue her dreams of business ownership and a successful nutrition business. So my guest today is Jennifer Sweeney. Jennifer is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, certified health-supported chef, and health coach. She has over a decade of experience in the food and nutrition space and is passionate about educating others on the importance of consuming real local food from sustainable sources. Jennifer believes that the key to making healthier choices and behavior modification lies in understanding and awareness of the correlation between what we consume and our well-being. She runs two businesses. One is Heart and Belly, where she helps her clients with health in general, gut health, all of those fun stuff associated with functional nutrition. And the new business that she now runs is called Pivot. Very appropriate for the conversation today. And Pivot is actually spelled P-I-V-A-A-T, and that is her corporate wellness business that she's going to tell you all about today and how she made that happen even when she was living in New York during the pandemic, and she had to make some really substantial changes to the way that she was supporting her clients. So if you're somebody who runs a business, or even if you're just somebody who has had to make a lot of changes in the last year and a half, I know you'll appreciate this episode and you'll really enjoy Jennifer's perspective on how she took a really challenging circumstance and turned it into something positive that she was able to grow her business with. So without further ado, here is my guest, Jennifer Sweeney. Okay, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Jennifer Sweeney. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So just so our audience can get to know you a little better, if they don't know you already, do you mind just sharing with them, how did you become a functional nutrition therapy practitioner, chef, and health coach?
It was a career change about 10 years ago, but in hindsight, I was pretty much always interested in health and nutrition since I was a little kid. And then when I was in college, my mother had cancer and my first thought was food. So I kind of got to that. And then, I did the corporate America thing. I was working in marketing. I was working in TV. And then towards the end of my 20s, I decided to go back to culinary school. And I found a health supportive culinary school, which also had classrooms hours about, cooking for cancer and heart disease and diabetes and Ayurveda. So it was much different than your traditional culinary school. So I did that. And then I was cooking for a while. I worked in a magazine in the food area for a while. And then about 6 years ago, I discovered I had an autoimmune condition. So the original path was to either take antibiotics and steroids every day or get surgery, a skin graft. And as a chef, a healthy chef, I was kind of like, let me look into diet. I think there might be something there. So I discovered an autoimmune paleo diet, AIP, went into complete remission within 90 days, have not had a flare up since, only very minor ones. And I've been able to reintroduce a lot of things and I'm still fine, not having flare up. So that kind of drove me back to NTA, Nutritional Therapy Association, to dive deeper into it. And then, so that was a few years ago and I started doing that. And I also got a health coach certification just in conjunction with that, just to try to encompass more. So.
That was a pretty concise story. I was expecting something a lot more long than that because you prepared me for it, but that was very to the point. That was what led you to create the Heart and Belly business?
Absolutely. Yeah. Heart and Belly was originally cooking. I started doing personal chefing and cooking for cancer patients, clients. And then now it's kind of moved more into, I'm doing only nutritional therapy now. And my niche is more sugar addiction and blood sugar regulation and prediabetes.
Gotcha. And I know that one of the things we were going to talk about today is how things have changed for you since the pandemic started. At this point, when this episode comes out, we're 18 months in or something, I feel like. So I know that it's been a long year and a half for a lot of people. And I would love to hear your story about what happened with your business when everything started and got crazy and still is a little crazy, just to let the audience know what you've been through.
Sure. No, I mean, like everyone, my world turned upside down in March of 2020. I was seeing clients in person at the time because I had transitioned from cooking to nutritional therapy. I still like being face to face, and I feel you relate to people better. So I was still meeting all my clients except for maybe one or two in person. And then obviously overnight, that was no. I'm in New York City, and all of a sudden it was just like, nope, we're shut down. You cannot go outside. So my clients basically ghosted me, most of them. Like I just stopped hearing from everybody. I was working with one woman who was trying to get pregnant. And of course, she probably put pause on that. So it was terrifying. And overnight, I was kind of like, what do I do? And I kept telling myself, all right, pivot. You got to pivot. And through a connection I had, I started doing corporate wellness stuff because I noticed that all of a sudden companies were really hungry for health information and to give their employees at home health webinars and cooking demos and stuff like that. So I started doing a lot more corporate wellness stuff. And because I was pivoting, I kept hearing the voice of Ross from Friends in my head. Pivot. So I decided to name my corporate wellness company Pivot, named after that. So yeah, I went from doing everything in person to overnight shifting to more corporate wellness. About 80% was more corporate wellness at this point. And then also trying to get all my nutritional therapy clients online as well. In retrospect, it was exactly what I needed and what I had been wanting to do for a while, but it just hadn't taken the leap onto online. So it ended up being a good thing, a very positive thing. So it was a 180 though.
Yeah, that's interesting that you had so many people just stop seeing you. I mean, at that point, I'm trying to think, I feel like most of my clients that I work with were primarily virtual, maybe a little bit in person. And anyone who was in person obviously had to not be in person anymore. But that was something that I had given up my office probably a year earlier. So it wasn't as hard for me to retain people. I mean, obviously people were freaking out about finances and that kind of thing, but the fear about, okay, well, if I can't see you in person, am I still going to get the same benefit, or like maybe I need to totally stop this whole process? So I know that a lot of people had that experience. And I mean, it was like either get online or close the business, essentially. Is that what your experience was?
Absolutely. But at the beginning in March, we didn't know how it was 2 weeks.
Right.
15 days, right? So we didn't know. So I feel a lot of my clients too, a lot of people fled New York City. So going from seeing me in person in New York City to all of a sudden like changing everything and having this new relationship with me was probably very not even thinking about it. And like you said, financial reasons as well. And I felt a little tone deaf those first few weeks to be talking about nutrition and like pushing it and reaching out to people or sending out my newsletter because everyone was just drinking wine and eating cookies and watching Netflix and trying not to watch the news. So it was an interesting time. Yes.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was like the full month of April, I kind of just like took a step back and was like, I'm not going to market anything. And I'm just going to kind of keep working with the people I work with and just see what happens. And I had my own pivot last year pretty substantially too. And it came from seeing all the people needing to move their business online. So I do remember, it's weird because it feels like a million years ago, but it is something where it was like, I think all of us had this moment of what's going on, everything stops, like, right. Like you said, let's get through the next 2 weeks and then we'll be on the other side of this. So
little did we know.
Yeah. So as far as the corporate wellness programs that you run, how do you do that for your clients? Because I know a lot of my clients have asked about how do you get into corporate wellness and what does that look like? So what do you do for your corporate wellness clients?
So I offer a mix of doing educational webinars, which are about an hour. I usually leave about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. And I have a list of topics that I present, but if they want to, suggest something, I do that. So I do that. And then I also do have a nutritionist for a day and do back-to-back 30-minute one-on-ones, which is really great because you're you can blow through a lot of people in those 8 hours and like you can book you for the week or a few days. It's exhausting, but you get to help a lot of people and kind of just get your message across really quick. And it also generates individual clients as well. And then I also do cooking demos. So that's a big part of it too. A lot of companies were into that. It's a little different than being in person to do cooking, but people were at home when we were originally locked down. Everyone was at home and everyone was cooking and getting more into it. So that was pretty popular as well. And then I recently I kind of wanted to add fun classes. So I have like a team of experts that I can tap into, to everything from like karate to exercise to meditation, to do little 30-minute classes like that, because I think it adds a nice mix to just being health focused. It's also just employees can have fun.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And so when you work with a company, are you approaching them and presenting like your menu of services, or do they actually reach out to you? How does that relationship start?
It's difficult. It's much more difficult and a much different animal than getting individual clients. So I'm still learning and growing in that aspect. I find it's the word of mouth. So you get one client who tells her she's good friends with the HR person and she tells you about it and they try you out and they love the webinar. So then they want to sign up for other things. That's kind of how it's going. But I'd say for the most part, more often than not, they're picking from the topics I suggest as opposed to them suggesting things. But every once in a while, they'll be like around the holidays, like we want to do a cooking class with, a fun Christmas cocktail or something like that they'll suggest topics like that. But for the most part, it's what I kind of have the list I present.
Mm-hmm. And then this is always a question that comes up, so I'll present it to you. How do you actually go about pricing your services for corporate wellness? Because I feel like when you're doing one-on-one, it's so much easier to think like, what is that person's value that they're getting? And, how does this compare to other services? So when you're doing corporate wellness, my guess is that the employees are not paying for it. So you have to really think, what's the value to the company? Because they're the ones that are paying. Is that right?
Absolutely. And also I take into account the size of the company, and something I'm learning too as I go, because now it's all remote, there's no limit to there could be 1,000 people on a webinar and sometimes there's 10. So it's like, do I price more for that? So that's something that I'm still playing around with and learning. But yeah, I just take into account my time. I mean, it's the same with individual clients. So like something for a cooking webinar, it's not just that 45 minutes that I'm making the food, it's the shopping, it's the costing the ingredients, it's the planning. Same with putting together a webinar, the amount of time I spend on that. So I take that into account as well.
Yeah, I always wondered about that because I know some of my clients will do presentations for like doctor's offices or something like that. And that's a little bit more of a obvious direct service as opposed to corporate wellness, where I'm guessing the employees like get to choose if they actually show up. So it's not like the company's making money from people. I mean, I guess you could argue they're making money if the person's healthier and not like missing work and stuff like that. But it's not the same as a doctor's office where you're actually attracting customers based on the presentation. So it's kind of interesting to have to figure out like, well, what should I charge for that? Because it is such a different type of value that you're bringing.
Exactly. And it's all the company's budget. And again, that has to do with its size and how much they put into corporate wellness. So it just comes back to what is going to make it worth it for me and what's going to make me want to do my best and what's the value of my time. So that's kind of how I've been doing it. But
yeah. Well, and I'm guessing with the corporate wellness, you're probably getting a very large volume of people that maybe you wouldn't normally have. I mean, even that 30 minutes a day or 30 minutes all day back to back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I would die. Like, I don't think I could, I don't think I could do that anymore, but maybe it's not as hard as it sounds.
Well, what's interesting is it varies. So like you were just saying, like the employee chooses if they show up or not. I've had days where the 2 people will show up the entire day and the rest are no shows. And then other days where 10 people are signing at once because they got California time versus New York time because it's all over the country. So there are days where it's back to back all people and other days where I just kind of have Zoom up and just, if they sign in, they don't. So it's varied. It really varies. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So with all these people that you're speaking with, even if it's just for a few minutes here and there, what are some of the big challenges that you're seeing over the last year and a half? And are there things that are different than they used to be with the clients you used to work with?
Absolutely. I'd say the number one thing, especially with this one company I was working with, everyone is just glued to their desk all day. You think working from home, you have more time to get up and maybe exercise during lunch, that type of thing. People are just glued to their desk all day and like forgetting to eat. Or then, it's 5 o'clock and they're ravenous and they binge on snacks. So there's that. And then also I think what goes hand in hand with that is that the lack of structure and routine. At the beginning, it's changed now. People got into their work from home routine. But at the beginning, all of our routines were thrown upside down. And people are creatures of habit, especially when it comes to food and being healthy and nutrition. And that was just turned upside down. And so that was an issue for a lot of people, as well as just being sedentary. So it all came down to that. But yeah, those were the biggest changes I've noticed. also, I mean, sugar's always been a thing, but I think a lot of people were turning to it for comfort but not realizing that they were having so much sugar. So I'd hear all the time, "I don't eat that much sugar." And they're just, "Well, what do you eat?" And then they tell you and you're like, "Okay, well, you're eating a lot." So those are probably the biggest things I noticed.
Is that still an issue? Because I know, when everything was first happening, it was kind of like, well, we got nothing else better to do. So let's just like you said, have some wine and eat some chocolate and that kind of thing. I feel like at least where I live, I don't know if, New York is probably a very different story than where I live, but I don't know if people are still in that like screw it mentality is the way I might describe it, where it's like, well, nothing else we can do to enjoy ourselves or to, pass the time or decrease stress. So are you still seeing that, or has that kind of slowed up a little bit since?
That definitely slowed up. I feel like people went in one of two directions. They either used lockdown to get really, really healthy, or they used the screw it mentality. But what I'm seeing now is everyone, regardless of which direction you went in, you kind of found your groove and you got into it and things are feeling back to normal. New York is pretty much feeling back to normal. But what I'm noticing now is there's fear and there's reluctance about going back to the old routine and then losing what they've established now. So people, if COVID's taught us anything, is that, upsetting your routine just throws everything up into the air. So now I have clients that are like, okay, I'm going back to the office. I've been with my family for so long. Now I'm going back to live alone. Now my friends want to go out to dinner again. I'm going to be eating out more. My kitchen's not as big. So people are now with the opposite direction. Like if we're going back to that old normal, how am I going to change this new routine that I've developed? So it's interesting in that aspect.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine, and when you say New York, are you speaking of Manhattan specifically? Mm-hmm. Okay. Because I feel like I always have to clarify that, because I feel like if you're in, upstate New York, it's a very different experience than Manhattan. So, and I don't know if you guys are having a lot of shutdowns again of things like gyms or anything like that, but I know for a long time in the beginning of the pandemic, that was a big issue where people like literally couldn't even exercise because they couldn't really leave their house and there wasn't anywhere to go and they didn't have gym equipment or anything like that. So is that something that has like passed, or are you still seeing people struggling to get their activity in?
No, I think activity has gone pretty much. People either figured out how to do it at home, or in New York, you just go for a walk. As soon as like the fear lifted, of going outside, people are going outside again. Gyms are back open, but vaccines are required. I think some still require masks, but I find that some people are still scared to go back, but they now have they have their Peloton or they have their Pilates mat or whatever, and they're finding ways to be active at home. So,
yeah, I feel like where I live is like, it's a suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina. And so I think we've had a very different experience, because I have some clients in New York, and just hearing like the different things that have happened with like, rules and stuff is just very different. So I'm always curious how the rest of the world's operating. So I feel like depending on where you are in the country, it kind of seems like a totally like different reality in a lot of cases.
Absolutely. And within each part too, it's changing all the time as well. Mm-hmm. So all our realities are always changing.
So what do you think is the most important health issue that we as a country are facing right now?
Oh, absolutely. Sugar. That's my big thing. I'm hyper-focused on sugar, but it's just such an issue. I see it more and more with clients. I see so many people that don't realize they're having issues with sugar. Most of us, I'm not going to throw out a statistic because you never know which one is right or of the moment. But I feel like so many people are walking around not realizing that they have blood sugar dysregulation or even prediabetes. I think I read recently that 1 in 4 adults age 18 to 44 is pre-diabetic, and most of them don't know because doctors don't usually flag it until you're all the way there. So I have actually clients that, I think this is one of the good things that came out of COVID. People are just much more aware and on top of their health more. So I've had 3 clients recently that come to me and said, my doctor didn't flag it. However, I Googled and my A1C is like right at the edge. So I want to do something about it. And I'm like, that kudos to you. That's amazing. So I think more awareness is coming to it, but I think the sugar is just ubiquitous. It's impossible not to consume it, but there are repercussions and we're seeing it more and more kind of show up in people. So that's something I think is a huge issue.
Yeah. So beyond the blood work, which like you said, a lot of times doctors are not necessarily pointing out unless it's already ready for some medication or something.
Exactly. It's too late.
What could maybe somebody who thinks, well, do I have an issue with sugar? What might be some ways that they could self-assess to determine if that was an issue for them?
Absolutely. So I'm actually a huge fan, and people's opinions on this vary, but of continuous glucose monitors, but they're becoming much more popular. Now you don't even need to go to your doctor to get one. I personally think we all should wear them at least like for 2 weeks just to get an idea of what affects us and how, because everyone's different when it comes to stuff like that. Your tolerance for carbohydrates and sugar is everyone's different. And also things like sleep and activity levels all affect it. So I actually recommend just, ask your doctor, hey, can I try this out? Especially if you're, on the verge of that A1C being too high. And that's the easiest way to do it. But if you don't want to go to that length, or your doctor's not on board with that, because some aren't, if they don't want you to hyper focus on the spikes and go down that rabbit hole. So I get that. I just notice energy levels, notice mood. Anytime I get a client to get off sugar, they always tell me like my anxiety's gone, my mood fluctuations are gone. I had a client tell me her husband wanted to thank me because her moods are better. I know that's awful, but I say mood and energy. If you feel like you're peaking and valleying, then something's probably going on with your blood sugar. But when you're more, when it's more balanced, you have that even keel. So I think that's a huge indicator of something's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the mood thing is really common, and it's kind of scary how most people they're quicker to just say that that's their normal mood than they are to say maybe something's not right here. Like maybe this isn't how I normally am. And, because even sometimes I'll have moments where I can it's almost like you're having an out of body experience where you're like, okay, I know that the way I'm reacting right now is not, this isn't normal. And then my rational brain starts to go through okay, why might I be experiencing this right now? And it's like, all right, got to check my cycle app. Where am I in my cycle? Or what did I eat today? So it's and I think something like that is it's weird. It feels so normal for people like us that are paying attention to that. But then most people are not thinking that way. Most people are just oh, I'm mad because this thing happened and now I'm going to hyper focus on what Sally in the other cubicle said to me, as opposed to thinking wait, am I having this reaction because this is a physiological problem that I'm reacting this way? So it is always funny to me to think that a lot of people don't actually have that literal rational, I hate to say angel on the shoulder, but it's okay, what's actually the problem right now? When was the last meal you had? How much protein did you have? That kind of thing. So do you see that with people that they feel like they didn't even realize how their mood was being affected?
Absolutely. It's, it's having that perspective, which most of us don't have. The first thing I noticed when I did AIP years ago, and I was eating pretty healthy, but I still, low fat, frozen Greek yogurt with rainbow sprinkles, that type of thing. Not only did my go into remission with my autoimmunity, but what I noticed more so is how amazing I felt. And it was a little terrifying for me to think, I've been feeling like crap for all of these years. And I think a lot of people are walking around that way because if you eat the standard American diet, or even the typical healthy diet that, we're shown, you might be not feeling your best. And then when you eliminate it, you realize that. And so I asked my doctor for a continuous glucose monitor. And one of the first things I noticed, it was interesting, yes, to see the spikes and, what happens when I'm active and not. But what I noticed the most was I found myself, I'd be sitting on my couch and all of a sudden I'd just get really sad and maybe irritable, or I'd be tearing up at a commercial. And I'd be well, where am I in my cycle? And no, that's not it. And then I'd check my blood sugar and it was 70. I'm oh, my blood sugar just plummeted. And immediately it's almost like a cloud came over me. So that was probably the biggest takeaway for me, is how much food and mood are connected, and with blood sugar, especially.
Yeah. I've seen those continuous glucose monitors as more of a direct to consumer kind of thing. Do they, are they being sold now without any sort of prescription?
So my understanding is that I think there are a couple brands now that are, like you said, direct to consumer, and they're memberships. So there's a doctor built in that is just prescribing them. So you don't have to go to your GP. But if you do go to your GP and you don't have diabetes or pre-diabetic, your insurance isn't going to cover it. But I think it's probably still more affordable than to do these membership things. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that because I was on one hand, it seems like if there's, because it actually inserts a needle into your skin, right? So it's,
It's like a wire. So it doesn't hurt. It's a very flexible little wire. So there does need to be a doctor involved. So
yeah, I was going to say, I'm anytime you're injecting anything into your skin, you should probably have some kind of medical professional involved. But I wasn't sure about that because I've gotten companies being hey, we want to send you one. I'm maybe I'll do it at some point. So it probably would be something helpful to experiment with at some point. Because I always think, for me, I feel I'm very self-aware of things about how I feel, but also sometimes you don't realize, like you said, sometimes you're living a certain way for a long time. You don't realize that you could feel better, or that, me being tired, that's not just because I'm getting older. It's because my blood sugar was messed up or something like that. So now as far as food is concerned, I know you said a lot of people think, oh, I don't eat that much sugar. Are there certain foods that people are eating that they don't realize are really high in sugar that is really a common, I'm eating a lot of this and I had no idea?
I mean, my first reaction was everything. I mean, there's added sugar in everything. But what bothers me, I think, is all these things that are labeled healthy or marketed as healthy. That I always use the example of, not to bash a brand, but Cliff Bar. That's marketed as, you take that hiking, it's exactly what you need. It's so healthy. It has 21 grams of sugar in it, which is ridiculous. So it's the things that are marketed healthy, like those energy bar aisles, are all basically just candy bars. So I think granolas, stuff like that, that just have all that sugar in it that people don't realize because they're just looking at the front of the package. I always tell people, just flip it over, read the ingredients, not even the label, like the nutrition label. Look at the ingredients first and see what's in there. And do you know what they are? Can you pronounce them? Are there added sugars? So it's hard for me to say one thing, but I think also things like clients are always amazed when I tell them, like, yeah, Hellmann's mayo has sugar in it, or ketchup has sugar in it. So things like that we've been eating our entire lives that people don't realize they're actually putting sugar into it.
Yeah. Well, and I would think, a little squirt of ketchup here and there is probably not what's really messing people up compared to something like, a lot of the breakfast cereals. And like you said, like a Cliff Bar. I mean, if somebody's hiking, maybe having sugar makes sense because they are actually burning through a lot of glucose if they're hiking.
Right,
but
exactly.
I feel like a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm just going to grab one of those and like get on the subway and like head to work or whatever.
Instead of breakfast. Just for breakfast. So and then your blood sugar is just doing a huge spike and plummet. So,
or like all the, we're in pumpkin spice latte season, that kind of thing, like
those, yes.
all the sugary coffees and stuff. And it's funny how people, like, I feel like my husband is one of those people that doesn't really necessarily realize how much sugar is in something. I forget what he was eating the other day that it was like, I don't know if it was juice or something, but he was like, oh, but it's healthy. It's like, oh, wait a second. It was some kind of like fresh, like fruit juice. And he was like, oh, but there's no sugar added. I'm like, well, no, but it's still like literally straight sugar. Like, what do you think? What do you think is in this? Like, it's like how many ever calories? I think it said like, I don't know, 100 calories per serving, and then he ended up having like 3 servings. I'm like, that's
of course, yeah.
It's like straight up 100 or 300 calories just of sugar. And if we do the math, that's like what, like, I don't know, 80 grams or something. I have to do the actual math on a calculator, but it's like, I think sometimes people don't think about, I mean, I'm not anti-fruit by any means, and a little juice here and there is not the end of the world. But if it's like somebody's thinking, oh, this is healthy and there's no added sugar, I think a lot of times I forget how people don't realize, like, just because something doesn't say that it has added sugar doesn't mean that it doesn't have sugar in it. And
exactly,
there is a point where it's like the quantity makes a difference. Like if you have a little shot of orange juice versus a jug or something, it's like that does affect your blood sugar pretty substantially.
Absolutely. There are a lot of products out there too that don't have the added sugar, but they're made from dates. Like now that's the huge, because it's shelf stable and it's sweet. But that's, like you said, it's like have half the bar, don't have the whole thing. And then you actually reminded me when you mentioned the pumpkin spice latte, something that I know a lot of clients do is they think, oh, I'm being healthier, I'm getting almond milk or oat milk at Starbucks. But I'm like, the varieties they're using are chock full of sugar. So it's not the unsweetened almond milk. So it's almost, I'm like have the full fat dairy instead of going with the almond milk or the oat milk in that case. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the syrups and everything that they put in there. I feel like half the time, if I've ever gotten one of those, which I don't really go to Starbucks anymore, but even when I would ask for like the half portion of the pumps. Cause it's like, I don't know, you just taste the official amount in it. And it's like, oh, this is really gross. This isn't even enjoyable, especially like some of the latte stuff. But I don't know. I think it is one of those things that people just get used to and they're not questioning it. Or, I know that with sugar, your taste kind of acclimates or whatever the word is, like it adjusts. So if you have a lot of it all the time, you're going to need more to really taste it versus if you're not really having it, a little bit goes a long way.
Oh, you taste it. Yeah. I mean, fruit starts to taste like dessert if you cut it out. So yeah, absolutely. If you're eating it every day, then you're going to want that full pump vanilla latte.
So you had mentioned that one of the positives from the last year and a half has been that people are starting to pay attention to their health more. Hopefully, it's I think it depends on the person.
It depends on the person. Yeah, absolutely.
Sadly, it doesn't seem like our news organizations or the government wants to like emphasize that at all. It's like, oh no, don't worry about that. We'll take care of you. So, what other?
They're giving Krispy Kreme to get the vaccine. So I'm like,
yeah, I mean, that's a whole podcast in and of itself. Exactly. So what other positives do you think may have come out of the last year, either for people in general or even in your own life? Because I know obviously this pivot that you made was maybe something that was triggered by the pandemic, and maybe you see that as a unexpected benefit of the experience. But what have been some of the positives that you've seen come out of the last year and a half?
So absolutely, with individuals, cooking, everyone was cooking more. And the chef in me was like, this is amazing. Everyone's like using up stuff in their fridge and wanting to learn new recipes and learn how to meal prep. It's been a huge popular webinar for companies is meal prep. So absolutely the cooking, like you said, the awareness, it depends on the person. But I think for the most part, people are becoming a little more aware of what you're putting in your body. And then also silver lining has been just people are more aware of where their ingredients are coming from. I feel like we're getting back in touch with the farmers and the local food and sourcing ingredients and where they're actually coming from. I'm on the board of directors for the Farm to Consumer Foundation, and we've been really pushing that. And we're finding there's a lot of interest in our newsletters of like, yeah, I want to go meet my farmer now and know where this meat is coming from or know where this vegetable is coming from. So those have been absolutely positives for individuals. And also, I think on the corporate wellness side, a lot of companies are now like, I want to keep my employees happy because everyone's working from home now. Everyone's been stressed. A happy employee is a better employee. So I think companies are going to put more weight into their employees, like mental well-being. And that goes with offering things like nutrition webinars or cooking classes. And then, like you mentioned, myself, just pivoting my business to online was huge. It was such a positive. I'm glad I did it. But I actually fell into the camp of the screw it, which is kind of crazy given what I do in my background. But I got a lot more lenient. So I have to get back to healthier habits. I've been working on that. At the beginning I was just like, well, I guess I can eat this now. I guess I don't have to exercise. So that was a change for me as well.
I wonder because I had a similar experience, and I wonder if the more consistently healthy you were, the more of the opposite direction you went in with the pandemic. Because it's like,
maybe, yeah.
I feel like, I don't know. It was one of these like, okay, I kind of need a little break, or not a break. I don't know. It's weird. Like, we had to build our own gym at our house because our gyms were closed for like 6 to 8 weeks here. And we didn't know when they were coming back. Like at that point, April, May last year, we were like, we have no idea when gyms are going to be open again. So we ended up like getting a Peloton and getting some lifting equipment in our garage. But even I think for us, the food piece was what kind of changed. And honestly, I think for me, a lot of that actually was a result of how busy our business has gotten with our pivot. So it's like, I used to be a lot more involved with food, like cooking and shopping. And now my husband's doing like all of it. And even though he's doing a great job, he doesn't listen to my podcast. So I'm sure he's not going to hear this. But I think like even just knowing that he doesn't really know how to make those choices, either I need to start getting more involved and be like, all right, I need to actually like participate in this again, or I just need to teach him a little bit. Cause it's like, I think I also had that moment of, and maybe it's still happening, like there's not a lot of fun to be had right now. Like even the stuff that we used to love doing, like concerts and travel and stuff, it's definitely limited still. And so I think my husband and I have kind of erred on the side of, well, let's just eat out or get takeout because we want to treat ourselves. And it's not something we were ever doing before. So I think for a lot of people, it was probably like, oh, maybe I should take care of myself so I don't get sick. And then the people who were already consistently taking care of themselves were like, well, the world's ending, so I might as well enjoy myself. Like, screw it. I guess I just have fun now. So I don't know if that was everybody, but I definitely think there's a lot of people that I know in the health space that were like, I haven't been taking great care of myself lately, so I should probably get back into that.
That makes me feel better. You hit the nail on the head because that's exactly what I did. All of a sudden I was like, well, all I have to look forward to is to order dinner tonight and support the restaurants in New York City and the delivery drivers and all the front line. So yeah, instead of cooking, I was just kind of like, oh, it's the least I can do and it's something to look forward to. And then obviously it's not always the healthiest choices when you order in. So yeah, that makes me feel better. So you're right. Maybe it's, we did the opposite because it was all there was to the fun.
Yeah. Well, and I think even with like alcohol, like we get, are you familiar with the company Dry Farms Wine?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's where we get a lot of our wine from. And it's not that that's like horrible for you wine. It's really high quality and that kind of thing. But like normally I don't drink a glass of wine every single night. But during the first several months of the pandemic, it was like, I need some stress relief. I need something to like, be enjoyable. So I haven't been doing that as much lately, but I do think just personally, I've been mentioning to my husband, I'm like, I feel like I need to kind of get back into some better habits just because I don't know. It's just weird. It's like you said before, if you had a habit, a lot of times that habit got knocked out when everything happened. And for people like us, maybe the habits were going to the gym or like, cooking at home and doing other things for fun. So I do think in general, like as things have, I don't know, I keep saying getting back to normal, but it's like, it never really feels like it's getting back to normal.
We don't really know.
Yeah. But as it's starting to at least get less horrible where, okay, things are open, I do think it is an opportunity to kind of reassess habits and say, okay, am I like taking as good of care of myself as I want to? Because I think obviously there's the risk of going into more of that like orthorexic, like, super rigid type of mindset. And I don't ever want to be there. But I think sometimes there is the overcorrection to say, well, I'm going to make sure I don't get orthorexic and have that wine or have
Exactly.
that takeout. And it's like, well, maybe I don't need that either. So I don't know if you've had that experience.
No, absolutely. I feel like that's kind of the mindset I had. It's just kind of like, well, I guess I'll just order in. But also in terms of activity too, like you were saying, habits. I was so active running around the city, seeing clients, and I have my yoga studio that I love that I go to almost every day. And then all of a sudden it's just like, you're sitting in your studio apartment in New York City and not moving. And they're making you fear even leaving your apartment. So I went from being very active to completely inactive. And it's similar to blood sugar, that also affects your mood. So that was something that's a habit I need to not go back to being crazy, like you said, orthorexic, working out all the time, but like find more of active level than just being at my desk all day now.
Yeah. And I think it's tough, especially if your business has been like changed, or maybe you've gotten even more busy with all of the opportunities to support people, especially virtually. I feel like maybe in the initial couple of weeks, people kind of were like, I don't know how to use virtual, so I'm just going to skip it. But I think one thing I've seen, especially with the nutrition space, is people are so used to using Zoom now that it's like nobody bats an eye when you're like, I am 100% virtual. So I think it does create a lot of opportunities to even have more business. And then if you're working virtually from home, like you could be sitting at your desk on Zoom for 8 hours straight.
Goes back to that consult.
Yeah. And so it's like you might have been the same amount of busy before, but if you had to run around New York to get to different people's apartments, that's a totally different type of lifestyle than sitting at a computer all day. And so I do think that's something that if your business took off because of the pandemic, which definitely some people had that experience, you might not have been like used to that level of virtual busyness, if that makes sense. And so that can become problematic too.
It's exhausting in a much different way. And I do find, like you mentioned, like everyone's so used to Zoom now that even though we're going back to normal, like no one wants to meet. Like I have clients within an arm's reach in New York. They're like, can we just do Zooms? I'm like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And even companies, I feel like even when they're going to be back in the office, because now I have clients all over the country, and also companies that have offices all over the country are able to accommodate everybody in the webinars and stuff. So I do feel like it's here to stay, the whole online, which is great. But like I just mentioned, it's a different animal than running around New York City all day.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. And I think I've seen a lot of people, just even in my Nutrition Business Accelerator program, like one of the things that we talk about is mindset, and specifically around time management. And something that I think can be really hard for people is when they're working from home and they have to like create those boundaries, like you were saying before, where people aren't used to having to create structure. I'm used to it because I've been doing it for so long, but even my husband, like he resigned from his teaching job and now is working for my business. And he's like, I don't know how to function without a schedule and without like a commute and that kind of thing. So I can imagine a lot of other people had that experience where it's like, I don't know what to do with myself when I'm not like in this routine. So I do think when people go into the online space for their job, even though it's very convenient and like, I think it's amazing and there's a lot of positives, I do think that there's a risk of getting into like bad habits of just being hunched over your laptop for 10 hours a day. And so I think creating supportive habits that allow you to do your job and also to take care of yourself is like a whole new skill set that a lot of people have to learn.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, one of the things I noticed at the beginning was everyone saying like, I forget to eat all day because I'm at my computer all day. It's like, so you're not going to grab coffee with your coworker or taking a lunch break or having a lunch meeting or an afternoon, go to the conference room type of thing. So people were literally like, oh, I haven't gotten up, like you said, in 10 hours. So yeah, I think people have found ways around that now, but that's still something, the sedentary aspect of it, I think is definitely a downside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm like literally standing right now because if I didn't have a standing desk, I'd be sitting like all day on Zoom. So, so now that things are, I feel like people are going back into the office, but also kind of still working virtually, and companies are starting to take their employees' health more seriously. What do you think the future of corporate wellness is going to look like potentially?
I think, like I mentioned, it's probably going to stay mostly remote. I'm sure some companies will want to do like in-person cooking demos where you get to taste the food type of thing, but you can reach so many more of your employees you can reach across the globe by doing remote and accommodate different time zones. And also I think people are more likely to just sign in at something, maybe while they're working on something else, and just listen to a webinar in the background, as opposed to having to like go to a conference room and sign up and make sure there are enough seats. It's unlimited the amount of people that can come to it. I also think that because of most people, I hope, are the awareness of health now, that it's going to be more health focused as opposed to, I don't know, corporate wellness runs the gamut in the topics, but I think it is going to be much more like nutrition focused, maybe activity focused, offering activity options for people that are home, or offering webinars about how to cook at home or meal planning, that type of thing. And then also I think just in general, there's going to be more of it because companies want to keep their employees happy. I think one of the things that has come out of this is that all of a sudden people are like, wow, why was I commuting 2 hours to work? And, like, this is great. And I like this. So they want to retain their employees. So I think, offering things that are fun and helpful is definitely in the future for it.
And if somebody is working for a company and they like the idea of having access to this kind of stuff, is there anything that an individual could do to get that happening at their place of work?
Absolutely. I mean, it depends. And more companies now have like wellness coordinators and, chief of people. Or just HR. So I'd say just contact the person who coordinates stuff like that and let them know you want more of that, because like I said, they want to keep you happy and they want to retain you, and they have budgets for it. I'm pretty much every company, unless it's really, really tiny, has some sort of budget for it. So yeah, find the person who's in charge of coordinating stuff like that and just let them know.
And then if somebody is listening that's a nutrition professional that thinks this could be a cool way to expand their reach, what tips do you have for getting in touch with a company?
It actually is the same thing in the other direction. Find that gatekeeper, the person who's making those decisions, the wellness coordinator, the HR person. Reach out, pick up the phone, send an email, offer a free webinar, something like that. Send a list of what you're offering. But I think the best way to do it is knowing someone at that company, make an introduction as opposed to the cold emails or the cold calling. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. Having something to show, this is what here's a 10-minute clip of a webinar that might be, or here's a 10-minute clip of a cooking class or whatever you want to offer. And just reaching out and showing them what you have to offer.
Yeah, it's always interesting because I think I'm used to things like reaching out to podcasts or collaborating with other online business owners. And I feel like I don't think I've ever reached out to make contact with a company like that. I think I might have been approached because, obviously those people are doing their research and trying to find people. But I've never done it before. So I was just like, what do you just like pitch them the way you would pitch a podcast? Maybe, right?
Exactly. It's a whole different animal. It really is. It's hard. It's much harder. So it's been a growing experience for me because I find both are word of mouth, but individual clients are much more word of mouth based than, when you're doing company business to business. So it's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
And then I feel like you have to be able to demonstrate the value in a much different way, because obviously an individual, it's easier to talk to their goals and their challenges. But when you're talking to a company, you have to really know, like, okay, how is what I'm going to do going to affect them as opposed to their employees, which I'm sure they want their employees to be healthy and happy, but it's like, all right, but how is this going to be a return on our investment? Since obviously, especially smaller companies, they don't have a ton of money to spend and they want to make sure they're putting it towards something that's going to get results. So,
well, you can do your research, all the statistics out there about, employee wellness and reduction in sick days and stuff like that. But also, I'd say testimonials from employees of companies that say like, this was amazing, because whoever's in charge of coordinating these programs wants the feedback that this was great. And they really like that because that means they're doing their job well. So just showing that I did this at this other company and look at this feedback I got, they want me back. They want to hear more. So I think that's also helpful.
That's cool. It's not totally different, but it's definitely a different angle that you have to take.
Yeah.
Testimonials are always one of your best marketing strategies. So, well, Jennifer, it's been so cool to talk to you about what you've been doing and how you have been able to kind of take your knowledge and skills and apply them in a different way since everything changed in the last year and a half. So if people are listening and they wanted to get in touch with you for either one-on-one support, or if they work for a company and they're like, oh, I'd love to have you come do something for my company, how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So my one-on-one website is Heart and Belly, just HEARTAND belly.com. pivatt.com. And my corporate wellness, like I mentioned, is pivot, spelled like Ross said it, pivaat.com.
That's so funny.
So you can contact me through either of those. I know, right?
Well,
but I mean, pretty much every generation gets that now. So everyone watches Friends.
Well,
so.
it is kind of funny also in the entrepreneur space. That's been like the word of the last year and a half for people. And almost every time somebody says something about it, somebody drops one of the Friends memes into the comments.
Exactly. I trademarked it right away. I like
that is really funny. You got in early. I feel like it's like, people are always using that word now. So, well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time and your expertise. And I'm especially appreciative of you sharing some of the tips for entrepreneurs, since I know that it sounds like you've done a lot of work to get better at that and to grow your skills in connecting with businesses. So kudos to you for putting the work in there, because I know sometimes when something's new, it can feel scary, and like, especially if it doesn't work right off the bat, it can make you question, like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing?
Exactly. So, you just have to keep failing until you get it. So keep trying different things until it sticks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time. And
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you to all of you for hanging out with us. And we will see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Are you a nutritionist or dietitian struggling to figure out how much to charge for your programs and services? Maybe you've heard that as a nutritionist, you should just charge what you're worth. But this way of thinking can cause you to either undercharge your clients or work yourself into the ground trying to earn your worth. As a healthcare provider, you can't set up a pricing structure that forces you to sacrifice your own health and well-being in the name of your business and your clients. But I promise it doesn't have to be this way. When you download my free profit planning workbook, I'll walk you step by step through the 10-step process for determining the right pricing for your nutrition business. As a nutritionist, you have the power to completely change someone's life for the better. There's huge value in that, so it's time to stop underselling what you do. By following along with this worksheet, you can determine exactly what you need to charge to achieve your revenue goals with ease. I'll teach you everything I've learned about pricing from growing my own nutrition business to over $250,000 in revenue annually, and helping other dietitian and nutrition entrepreneurs hit their first $10,000 to $30,000 months and beyond. To get your free workbook, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/profit, PROFIT, and grab your copy today, so you no longer have to wonder how to set the right rates for your incredibly valuable nutrition services. That's lauraschoenfeld.com/profit. It's time to make the money that you deserve as a nutritionist, and I can't wait to help you get there.